today. Just to give you a little background, like Elizabeth said, I am a high school math teacher, so I'm not, used to adults. I'm used to the 15, 16, 17-year-olds that are looking at me, and I provide them with motivation, and I also teach them mathematics. But before I get started, I just wanted to share with you guys just how special and awesome this moment is for me right now. Because this was never part of the plan for me. I never, ever wanted to be a motivational speaker. In fact, I hated speaking when I was a teenager in high school. I hated it so much that my graduation speech, my mother wrote, and I read a half hour before I said it. So it's pretty awesome for me to be here, to be able to share my story. And when Elizabeth's like, you got 45 minutes to talk, you're going to be good, I'm like, I'm ready, right? So this is really special for me today. And I just want to encourage you guys, if you ever get that chance in your life to sit back and really recognize just how awesome you are, please take it. Because sometimes in life, the path that we were given isn't the plan that we chose. See, my plan was at 17 to go to college and become a teacher, and I thought that was it. But I realized as I taught and I got to know my kids, I realized that they needed so much more than mathematics. They needed inspiration, they needed motivation. And so I started just doing these little things in my class that kind of perked them up. And eventually my kids are like, Mr. Guerrieri, like this stuff's good, you should put it on YouTube. So I started putting stuff on YouTube. And then I started putting stuff out there in social media, and I started getting good feedback, and I realized like all of our stories matter. They may not matter to everyone, but I guarantee that there's someone in the world that your story matters to you. And it might be your spouse, it might be your kids, it might be your coworker. But please don't ever take your life for granted. Okay, so I just wanted to start out by saying that to all you guys. Now, as I go through my speech, I'm going to share my story with you. And my goal today is not to just give you a cool story. Because I could post that online and give you a cool story. What I want you to do is, if you can, be extremely vulnerable with me today. Now, you don't need to share anything with me, but I want you to find a piece of my story that relates to you. Because my goal as a speaker is always to try and find you a way to get in touch with yourself so that you can pursue the best version of yourself. That's my goal. And what happened for me was I had to do that all on my own. So a lot of people will look at me and they're like, certified G, like I don't get it. Like here's this dude rocking J's in jeans with a hat on. I don't quite get it. What could he say that's possibly going to inspire me? Right? But what I learned on my journey was I had to be my authentic self. So me standing up here, this is me at 100%. Sometimes 120, and I'm sure you'll see as I go throughout, sometimes I'm going to hit 150. I may flip my cap, I may be sweating. It's just whatever I feel at the moment is going to come to me. So I want to start off this speech by asking you guys this question. How many of you have ever been at a crossroads in your life? Right? A time when you knew, whether good or bad, the decision that you were about to make was going to change your life forever. Can you think about it, right? Now, some of us may look at that crossroads and we may look at it with regret. We may look at it and say, why wasn't I brave enough to pursue the other way? Why wasn't I courageous enough to make the change? You ever met somebody like that where they look back and said, I should have been or I could have been this? They look at that crossroads with regret. How many of you can think of a crossroads that you think about with pride? A crossroads where you can look back and know 100% you bet on you. You took the chance on yourself and it changed you forever. Now, I would venture to say we've actually all been at both of those crossroads. I don't know about you, but for me, I have crossroads that I look back at with regret, and I have crossroads that I look back with at pride. And to start out today, I want to share with you guys the biggest crossroads of my life, which sent me down a path that I never planned on happening. But before I do that, I have to give you a little bit of a background about myself. So yes, I am a teacher, but I'm not a native Texan. I grew up in a city just outside of Cleveland, Ohio. And for the majority of my life, I thought I was from a big town. But this last summer, I took my wife back, and she was like, honey, this is not a big town. are 2 roads in and 2 roads out. She's like, I'm a native Houstonian. We have like 7 highways to get in and out. So, I'm from a small town in Ohio. So if you would have told that kid, the small town kid from Ohio, that his stuff would be on the internet, helping people change and inspire their lives, I would have told you there's no way. See, but I grew up with a really good family. My parents were both educators, surprise, right? It's in our blood. And they worked so hard, and they gave me and my brothers anything that we could ask for. If we wanted a sport, we had it. If we wanted the newest video game, we had it. And to the outside perspective, a lot of people thought that we had the perfect life. But for me, a lot of people didn't know that I struggled with mental health my entire life. See, when I was a kid, I was labeled gifted and talented. So I was the annoying kid in the class who, whenever the teacher asked the question, I would raise my hand and I would want to answer it. So much so that sometimes the teacher would be like, why don't you put your hand down and give the other kids a chance? And what that did was it made me stick out. And it led to me getting bullied in elementary school. I got bullied so bad in school that at one time they had a party where every other kid got invited to the party, but I didn't. And how did I find out? I showed up on Monday. I said, how was everybody's weekend? And can you imagine at 8 years old when everybody looks around and they're like, yeah, this dude wasn't there. So you know what I learned at 8 years old? I learned at 8 years old that I couldn't show who I really was because I made other people uncomfortable. So at 8 years old, what did I turn to? What was acceptable for me to turn to? I couldn't turn to drugs. Like, come on. I couldn't turn to alcohol, so I turned to food. And I turned to something that helped me hide who I really was. And my weight just went through. But you know what I found out? The fatter I got, the more people were okay with me being around them. The more people were like, yeah, I'm going to have this guy here because even though he might be smarter than me, he doesn't look better than me. So this led me to a path where at 12 years old, I was 187 pounds and I sat across from a dietitian and I got told I was morbidly obese. At 12. At 17 years old, I got to a weight of 270 pounds and life for me was so rough that I ended up writing a suicide note that I stuck in my top dresser because I didn't know if I would have willpower to get through the day. And I wrote to my parents because I never wanted them to blame themselves for what happened to me. Like, that's how bad my life was. Like, that's how tough it got for me. But to the outside perspective, a lot of people thought this middle-class kid who's got the perfect life. And at 24 years old, I was a weight of 360 pounds. 360 pounds, November day in 2011. Whether you believe in God, whether you believe in divine intervention, something happened that would change my life forever. See, I know without a shadow of a doubt that there is one thing that I am absolutely great at in this world, and that is teaching young kids. See, I couldn't stand to be in front of an audience, but if you put me in a group of 30 kids, I will do whatever it takes to make sure they learn it. Because I never wanted a kid to feel like I felt. I wanted them to feel special. I wanted them to feel valuable. I wanted them to go pursue whatever they wanted. I was 24 years old. I had a class refused to do my work. And I remember I never lost my temper as a teacher. And to this day, I've probably only lost it a handful of times. And what I did was I stood up, threw all my books off on the ground, and I looked at them and I said, why do I have to love you more than you love yourselves? And I realize now in hindsight how hypocritical that was. Because here I am at 360 pounds, so I bet a lot of them are like, dude, you're telling us about self-love? Right? But what happened was I got into an altercation with a student. To this day, I have only ever yelled at maybe 5 kids face to face. And I took my job so personal back then because it was the only thing I was good at. So I took it home. I lived on my own. So when I left work, those kids went with me. You know, like I took their stories with me. Well, I left work this day in November, and I went to my parents' house, and we did a weekly dinner. And when we finished up dinner, when the meal was over, I started feeling numb in my right arm. And I couldn't clench my fist anymore. And so my mom looks at me and is like, you got to go to the emergency room. And I said, no, I'm not going to the emergency room, because up until this point, like, I hated doctors, because doctors looked at me and they said one thing, you know you're out of shape? No joke, you know? But I didn't want to go. But I don't know if you've ever met a 100% Hispanic woman. I don't know if you've ever met a Hispanic woman who, when their baby is in danger, there is no question. So at 24 years old, I was still fearful my mother was either going to go in the closet and get her belt or come back with the chancla. So I got in the car and I went to the emergency room. And when I got to the emergency room, they sat me in the room and they said, take your shirt off. And I said, for what? And they said, well, we got to give you an EKG because your symptoms are showing that you might have suffered a heart attack. And I remember looking over at the assistant and I said, like, you got this wrong. Like, I'm 24. Like, I can't have a heart attack. And they didn't say anything back, but I could tell, you know, when you read people's eyes, like, I could tell they were like, you may be 24 years old, but you're 360 pounds. So, like, a heart attack is clearly on the table, you know? So then the doctor came back 10 minutes later, and he said to me, like, you don't have a heart attack right now. You didn't experience a heart attack, but your body is under immense stress. And I remember immediately after that, he asked a question that would change my life forever. He said, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I didn't have an answer. What I wanted to tell him was, like, 5 years, man. Like, I don't know if I'm going to make it 5 weeks from now. I'm struggling so much. And so he looked at me and he said, if you continue down this path that you're going on, you will be dead by 30 years old. And like I said, I can't tell you if it was divine intervention or not, but I felt at that moment, as I sat on the edge of that hospital bed, something changed in me. And when the doctor left, it was me on the side of that table at the biggest crossroads in my life, where I had to decide, do I keep going down the path of gaining weight? Do I keep doing this to myself? Or do I have the courage to change my life? See, because as I sat there, what was crazy was I didn't view how much I was a failure, right? I didn't look at myself as this waste of space that I had all the time before then. What I viewed myself was, I may never get married. My parents might have to bury their son because I can't come to grips with who I am. And as I sat on the edge of that table, I made a deal with God that said, I don't know how much time that you're going to give me left. And I realize that I'm on borrowed time right now. But I promise you, with everything that I've got, I'm going to wake up every single day and bring 100% to the rest of my life. Because I'm tired of living on other people's terms. I'm tired of living for other people's approval. I just want to know what it's like to be me. And so I decided to go on this journey of weight loss. And what happened was, I transformed my life forever. That's okay. Because I love my transformation because it gives people a visual. See, you can't necessarily see the person next to you change, but when someone drops weight, you get to see all of it. And that's the gift that I was given. So my transformation from here, everybody's like, how did you lose the weight? What physical activity? My transformation had nothing to do with weight. It had everything to do with self-love. Because you know how you go to the gym multiple hours a day, multiple times a week? Because you love yourself enough to go do it. So for the rest of the speech today, I want to give you 4 lessons that I learned. I've got multiple lessons, but I want to give you the 4 that I really feel like inspired leaders could use the most. Is that cool with you? All right. So I still have those pants. Isn't that, I mean, That is crazy. I have lost more weight than like my wife plus 50 pounds. So that's insane to me on how I was able to turn my whole thing around. So the first lesson I want to share with you is start right now. And I know for a second I'm going to be a little morbid, okay? And what I mean when I say that is, what if I told you right now that you had 10 years left to live? What if I told you that right now, that you had 10 years left to live? Would certain things in your life stop mattering because I told you that statement? Would certain worries go away? What if I told you you had 5? I bet things start to get a little clearer. What if I told you you had 1 day left? What would you do? Who would you contact? Who would you say goodbye to? Right? And I know that's hard. I know that is a very hard truth, but that is what changed my life forever. When a doctor looks you in the eyes and says, you got 6 years left, you get clarity you ain't never had before. So whatever it is that you want to do, whatever your dream is, all you entrepreneurs, whatever it is, stop being afraid and putting it on the back burner and go get it. Because you deserve it. Your family deserves to see the best version of you. The community we live in deserves to see it. So I encourage you to start right now. Now, for my start, it was very different. So when I left that hospital room, when I started, the next day I was like, I'm going to go exercise, which to me was this gigantic thing for me because I had never wanted to exercise. I felt like that was the devil. Like, what? Go out there and sweat and exercise? I'm not going to do that. So I made a deal with myself the next day after my heart attack scare, and I said, I'm going to put on my workout clothes, and I'm going to go walk as far as I possibly can. That's what I wanted to do. And so when I left my house, I made it 1 block. 1 block, and my chest started going. So I said, well, I guess I better go back home. So I went back home, and I laid down on the floor. And what happened for me was I started to realize what I had done to me. I remember feeling at 24, I can't even walk a block without being out of breath, without feeling like I'm going to die from a heart attack. And I said, all right, like this is it. I got to start to own who I am. And so what I did was the next day I woke up and I was like, I want you to go as far as you possibly can. Next day I made it 2 blocks. Okay, nothing impressive to the outside person, but I went further than the day before. The 3rd day I woke up, made it 3 blocks. 4th day, 4. 5th day, 5. About a month in, I started to be able to walk a mile, which for a lot of people isn't a big deal. But for me, a mile was like, wow, I'm fit. You know? A mile for me was like, wow. And so 2 months of working out, I finally worked up the courage to step on the scale for the first time since I was in that emergency room. In the emergency room, it said 360 pounds, but the first time I stepped on, it said 342. Right? And see, the old me would have saw the 342 I had left. But the new me saw the 18 I already dropped. And so what happened was I realized that it didn't have to be big chunks. Now, like, I love The Biggest Loser. I love to watch it, but they make you believe that you can just drop 11, drop 19, or whatever it is in 1 week. And it wasn't realistic. And I realized if I started with 1 block and I went to 2, imagine what happens a year from now. So I finally worked up the courage, and I went and I joined Weight Watchers with my family. Which, if any of you have ever done Weight Watchers, it is predominantly women. So as I walked in as a 24-year-old male, you can imagine like the whiplash from all the people when I walked in. Right? And it was really scary for me because when you go to Weight Watchers, you have to step in front of a scale and you don't necessarily see your weight, but somebody else does. And so I stepped on the scale, and it said 342, and the lady was like, you got this. And I just remember feeling so encouraged because it was like, wow, they don't see me as this failure. And so I went into the meeting, and during the meeting, the leader goes, and she says, you can't expect to lose 20 pounds in a week, but you can expect to lose 1 to 2 pounds a week. And I'm sitting here as a math teacher, and I'm like, wait a minute, 1 to 2 pounds a week. Well, there's 52 weeks in a year. I think I'm going to lose 100 pounds in a year. And I turned and I told my mom to lose 100 pounds in a year, and she was like, why don't you take it slow? Which I appreciated her realism. But I had a hunger after I dropped that first 18 that I never had in my life before. And I was like, Mom, I'm going to drop 100 pounds in a year. I'll tell you that I dropped 100 pounds in 11 months. I dropped 100 pounds in 11 months. That just goes to show you, all you need is a little momentum. So whatever your goal is, and I don't care where it's at in your life, it could be in your job, it could be in your business, you may want to be a better mother, a better father. You may want to be a better spouse. Whatever that goal is, start small. Tell your wife that they matter today. Tell your kids that they're proud of them. And I tell you, in a year, you'll never be able to estimate how much progress you made. Okay? So that's my first lesson, is you have to start now. Please stop waiting, because none of us are promised tomorrow. None of us are promised 50 years from now. Let's make it count for the ones that we care about. Okay, so my second one, I know that one's a little heavy, so I like to do a little comedy with this one. So every year, my wife and I, since we have been dating together, we take 2 trips. I get to choose one. My wife gets to choose the other. I choose the same trip every year. I choose WrestleMania. Every single year, I go to WrestleMania, which I'm a little nervous this year because of the virus. I'm waiting on the email that says, no, it's going to be postponed or canceled. But my wife chooses the trip that we take in the summer. So for this specific year, she chose Hawaii. Honey, you booked it like maybe 2 weeks in advance, but we still made it there. So when we got to Hawaii, my wife and I are all about equality. So I pick one trip, she picks another. I get to pick a day of activities. She gets to pick a day of activities. So it was the second day there was my day to pick. So I picked to take a tour of Oahu. You know, be the tourist. Have your little umbrella drink, go around. They cart you everywhere. Go to the Dole Plantation. It was like my cup of tea. I was like, yes, this is awesome. I can just chill. So we're on this tour, and the bus goes around, and we see this on the side of the road. And somebody, raises their hand on the bus, and they say, what's that? And my wife, I swear, almost jumped out of her seat because she was like, jumps up, and she's like ready to listen. And the guy goes, this is called Cocoa Head Crater. And she was like, what are the things on the side of the mountain? And he goes, well, those are steps to the top. And somebody asked on the bus, well, how many steps? He said 1,024. My wife turns to me and smiles, and she's like, I know what we're doing tomorrow. And immediately I knew I was screwed. Because I thought my point in that was my cardio was good. My wife's cardio was great. But I knew I couldn't argue. I'm like, well, I took her to 8 hours of WrestleMania, so this is my IOU come to life. So we immediately get back to the hotel, and we Google the top of Cocoa Head Crater just to see what it looks like. Like, is this really worth it? Yeah. And my wife's, her eyes just get massive, and she's like, we are doing this. It's happening. We're renting a car. We're getting there in the morning. And I'm like, okay, let's go. So the next day, we woke up. I don't even like driving in Houston, so I had to drive my wife in Oahu. But they were okay, because they were like, we are fast drivers here. It's 50. What? So, aloha. So we went ahead and we got there, and we parked the car, and I start to look at this thing. I'm like, this is pretty steep. This is pretty steep. And we get to the bottom, and there's a warning sign there. You know, like when you're at Disney and they have the warning sign like caution? Right? Well, there's a sign at the bottom of this crater that says, be cautious because you could die. And I thought, like, ignorant me was like, this is a Hawaii National Park. Like, come on. They're just trying to scare you, right? So we go a little bit further, and then all of a sudden we start to see all these shoes on, like, telephone poles. And I'm like, now this ain't the ghetto. Like, what is going on with all these shoes? So we get to the bottom of the mountain, and we see this. This is actually the bottom of the mountain. And it looks like steps, but they're actually not steps at all. They're railroad ties, because this used to be a train track from World War II. So I thought it would actually be like a cardio workout like the Stairmaster. Well, no, there's no railings. It's not safe. But my wife started climbing, and I'm, as machisto as I am, I'm like, well, if she's going, I got to go too. So I start climbing with her, and every step is numbered. And there's 1,024 steps to the top. So you're getting there, and you're getting. So once we got to the first 100, my wife looks at me, and she says, you can turn back. Like, you came, you brought me, I'm going to go. And I'm like, no, I'll keep going. I said, you can go ahead of me, but I'll keep going. And so we get to 100, 200, 300. Now my wife's probably at 500, but I'm still going. And there's other people climbing the mountain. And they're passing me, and then there's people that I pass, and so on and so forth. When you get to step, I would say, about 500 to 600, the bottom actually disappears from the railroad ties. So the ground that's your safety net is no longer there for about a good 10. So you actually there were people that were crazy enough, but they run across. Or if you were like me, I got on my butt and jumped on each one. And I had my cell phone and everything. I'm like, oh man, this stuff might drop. But we made it, and we got through there. But as soon as you cross that path, then it becomes a straight. Do you see what happens? The incline goes up. It becomes a straight to the top. And now it's almost like you're climbing. I know, that's what I said too. Oh gosh. But I'll tell you what happened to me on step 600. You ever done anything you got in a flow state? Where everything else kind of just leaves you? See, when I got to about step 600, I knew I had 424 to go. But I didn't see everybody else climbing the mountain with me. The person I saw climbing the mountain with me was the old version of me. And at step 600, everything else kind of just disappeared. And then it became personal for me. It was like, yes, this is cool to climb, but this is personal. The old you would have quit. The old you would have said, don't do it. So I finished the climb. And when I got to the top of the mountain, do you know what is so interesting about it? Is when I got to the top, I looked at the view. And do you know what I realized? Was it's the same view that Google has. There's nothing special about the view. What was special was the climb. See, nobody could take away what that climb meant to me. Nobody could take away the fact that we did it. We got to the top. So I want you to think about that as you guys pursue all these things in your life. Don't get obsessed with the view, because the view is never going to be enough. And that's what I learned on my weight loss journey. I always thought the view of being skinnier, being healthier, being leaner would be enough. And what I realized on all my transformation, I fell in love with the climb. I fell in love with getting better. When you fall in love with the climb, do you know what that does for any goal that you want to set? You fall in love with improvement. And that was my biggest secret. So whatever you guys try and pursue, please don't fall in love with the view. The view is amazing, and enjoy the view while you're there. But the view will always leave you something that says, that was it. Right? Okay, so my third lesson is to avoid the flat line. Avoiding the flat line. It's kind of funny because this is like kind of how that EKG was looking that day a little bit. Now, what do I mean when I say avoid the flat line? Have you ever gotten a thing in life where you're like, I have this goal, and you hit like a plateau? Right? Have you ever had a relationship flat line? Where it's like neither one of us want to give to it? Have you ever had like your job flat line? Like, I'm going to this job and I can't have, like, it's doing nothing for me. I got nothing. And so for me, I needed people to understand you have to avoid the flat line. Now, I'm going to share a story with you. Remember how I said I was gifted and talented as a kid, right? So there was only one thing I was really, I knew I could make my parents proud at. I wasn't the greatest athlete. I wasn't the greatest, kid. I was kind of a bad kid sometimes, well-behaved but bad temper. But I was very good at school. And I remember when I was about 12, probably 11 or 12, my mom took me to my oldest brother's parent conferences. And she let me go, and she's like, go walk around and find something to do. And so I got to this wall in my high school, and the wall in my high school was the wall of valedictorians. I couldn't even read the word valedictorian, but I asked my mom at that time, what is this? What does this mean? And she was like, well, this is who graduates top of their class. And I was like, Mom, do you think I can do that? And she's like, well, you can do anything you want. It's just, do you want to do it? And I said, well, what does that mean? And she was like, well, usually those kids get a full ride. Well, I'm from a small town in Ohio. So if I was going to do anything, I needed to get out. And to me, I knew I wasn't good at sports, but my ticket out was my academics. So I made a goal and I made a promise to my mom on that day that said, Mom, I'm going to graduate valedictorian. So that's what fueled me. I was overweight, I was obese, but I knew I could outsmart and outwit anybody. So I set that goal. And would you believe that throughout my entire high school career, I never got a B? I rocked perfect grades all the way through high school. All the way through, I got straight A's. I was number 1 all the way till May of my senior year. See, in my high school, it's a weighted GPA. Well, the local community college was a half hour away, and in Ohio, that means risking a young driver driving in the snow. And I just didn't have that luxury of a car and things to go and pursue that, where other kids did. And so what happened was that last semester I got jumped as far as GPA. And I was informed 2 weeks before graduation that I would be graduating number 2. And I can't tell you the emotion that went through me at that, because here I am, man, I'm a kid barely hanging on, struggling with social anxiety and depression. And then all of a sudden you get told, dude, you played the perfect game. You know when a pitcher throws a perfect game in baseball? I threw a perfect game and I still lost. Well, that wrecked me. That wrecked me. I actually stopped trying after that. Now, a lot of people will be like, well, you still got a full ride to school, which I did, and I'm very proud that I did that. But when I went to college, I didn't try as hard as I did in high school. So it's no wonder that my first year in college, I ballooned from a weight of 270 to 340. Why? Because I stopped trying. I couldn't avoid the flat line. So what happened for me was I learned to stop trying, because why work so hard? Why outwork everybody else? Why have to do more than the regular person when you're still going to end up second place? Well, see, I got reminded when I was 24 that it doesn't matter what everybody else is doing. It doesn't matter how you compare to everybody else. It's how do you feel about you. So my best advice to you guys is please avoid the flat line in whatever you pursue. If you have a relationship, if you have a friendship that you know flatline and there's something that you can do about it, please be the courageous one, pick up the phone and make the first move. Resuscitate it. If you have a relationship with your kids that's flatlining, be brave. Be courageous. Tell them that they matter. You have the responsibility to resuscitate it. If you have a job that you know is flatlining, be brave, be courageous, and resuscitate it. Because avoiding the flat line just led me to a whole nother level of life. For me to realize, it doesn't matter if my peaks or my valleys are like everybody else's, they're mine. Okay? And then I'm going to take you to my fourth lesson as I wrap up. And that you got to finish the race. Now, I'm very curious. How many people are runners in here? Is anybody a runner? Okay. How many miles are there in a marathon? 26.2. Can anybody tell me what they think is the most quit mile? If you know it, please share it. Does anybody know what the most quit mile of the marathon is? 26, 13, 20. Okay. The most quit mile of a marathon is actually mile 21. See, when I ask my students this, they'll say mile 26. But if you've ever been a runner, you know if you see the finish line, you are going to finish. I will crawl. I will have somebody cart me. I will do whatever it takes. Remember like Cool Runnings when they got to the finish line? When you get to mile 26, if you can see it, you can achieve it. But then I'll have the kid in class who's like, mile number 1. Mile number 1. You mean to tell me as I'm running a race that I'm going to quit? That means I'm like the first person to quit. Most people don't get there. They're not going to quit on mile 1. Plus, I got a runner's high. I'm at least going to make it to the water station or the snack station to get my free breakfast, thing that they give you. So it really had me thinking, why is it mile 21? Now, if you do the math on this, because math teacher, if you take 21, it is 70% of the race, which is so funny to me because 70% in school means D. And as my students love to say, D means diploma. So when I told them it's 70%, I said, I want you to think about why it's 70%. See, because when you get to mile 21, the physical pain isn't going to get any worse. It's not going to get any worse. You've maxed out that physical pain. What is it? It's the mental pain. See, at mile 21, I can't see the finish line. At mile 21, I can't see the end. At mile 21, I don't know when the pain's going to stop. And this stops to become a physical thing and starts to become a self-love thing. Do you think you're worth it to go the extra 30%? Do you think you're worth it to finish it? And that's why people quit. It's not because it's too hard. It's because they don't think they're worth it. And that's amazing to me because as I look at people, you ever have those people, I should have been this or I should have done that? Why didn't you do it? Because you didn't think you were worth enough to finish the 100%. Because life's hard. Life knocks you down. People knock you down. But ultimately, the one person who defies if you make it to the finish line or not is you. So for me, I always tell people you have to finish the race. Now, I'm going to make this extremely personal for me, this last speech. Because for me, I actually lost all my weight and I got to about 215 for the past 3 to 4 years. And when I made the deal with Elizabeth to do this speech, I said, I got to finish what I started. My goal when I set out was to always get to 199. I wanted Wonderland. I wanted it to happen. I don't know why. I don't know why that number mattered to me, but it mattered to some degree, and I always left that unfinished business. So when January 2020 came around, I said, I got about 2 months to drop 15 pounds. And I had to get back into who I was when I lost all the weight. See, because I hate to say this, but sometimes in life you get content. And when I was losing my weight, my goal was to get married. And I made that goal happen. My goal was to be a successful business person. I love my job in teaching. I opened my own YouTube station and stuff like that. Like, I'm doing great. But I had one unfinished thing left. So I had to tap into the old me who didn't have anything proven to himself. And so I have this philosophy that I do. My goal always has been and always will ask you all the time, how did you lose all the weight, right? I tell them I took and I made a goal to lose something every single week. I don't care if it's 0.1 or if it's 5. My goal was to always lose something. And I felt like I can control that. So what I did was I do these things on Friday. They call my last chance workout because I weigh in Friday night. So I go to the treadmill at the gym and I go till I can't go anymore because it reminds me of how bad I want things. So as we started doing this in January, I went on a Friday. My wife was like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm at the gym. She's like, for how long? I was like, I don't know. Let's see. I made it 6 miles the first run. The next week, 6.5, 6 again, so on and so forth. And as I got closer, you better believe I found a way to dig deeper at it. So we hit the end of February, and I'm at 2:01. And I go the last time to the gym, and I said, I'm going to go till I can't go anymore. 14 miles later. The people at the gym were like, bro, you've been here for 3 hours. You know, and like, I go to the gym at 3 in the morning. So like, there's not many people there. I'll go at 3 in the morning, and then I'll go in the afternoon. And do you know why I do that? Because I have to remind myself, it doesn't matter what everybody else is doing. Because the true hard work is when no one else is watching. Right? But I put in 14 miles, and when I got on this scale this time, I saw 199.7. I had hit my goal. But what I want you guys to realize is you can dig deeper in places you never thought were capable. I'm sure to the outside person, 3.5 hours at the gym is crazy, but they didn't want my dream. They didn't want it like I did. They didn't know what it meant to me. So whatever your dream is or whatever you want to pursue, be able to dig deep and finish that last 30%. Because you are capable of it. Every single one in here is capable of living that dream. You just have to tell yourself and give yourself the permission to go and get it. And when you can do that, the rest of this is easy. So I want to thank you guys so much because those are the 4 lessons that I had. But before I finish up, my wife and I are actually doing something a little different with our with Certified G Motivation. So my goal is, and always will be, it's not to get the best profit or get anything. I love speaking to people. I love motivating them. My number one goal as a speaker is to always help people understand that there is the best version of them out there and that it matters. And so one thing that we want to just recognize people who are killing it in everyday life. Like, you ever have someone like that? Like, I have this awesome barista at Starbucks. And to a lot of people, she'll never get the recognition. But every time I go into Starbucks, hey, Mr. Chris, got your coffee ready for you. And I'm like, you deserve to be recognized because you are a badass at life. You may never get the acclaim that you need, but you matter to me. You have no idea what it means when I walk in every morning. Good morning. I count on that, right? And so one of the things I want to do is, if you can ever visit my website, please do. It's right here, cgmotivation.com. If you literally Googled Certified G Motivation, I pop up. And on my website, I'm going to do this thing called the Certified for Greatness Project. And where I'm going to go and I'm going to surprise people in the Houston area who are just killing it. I don't care what it is. I don't care, because people need to recognize you matter. And in a world where we compare each other all the time, sometimes the smallest thing of saying you matter is the hardest for people. So if you know anyone in your life, I don't care how small or how big you think they are, that deserves that nod, please let us know. And one thing we want to do is give them a shirt, and I'm going to crash on them with my YouTube videos, and just show people, like, you don't have to be famous and have 10 million followers to matter, right? And so we wanted to start that off by actually having our first person be Elizabeth.